Welcome to Vreme za prikazni with Koreni. Today we have Miss Judy reading as our guest.
Today we're going to read a book called The Tale of Three Trees. It's a traditional folk tale that's been retold by Angela Elwell Hunt and illustrated by Tim Yonke. It's a folk tale, so as often is the case with folk tales, they don't know who the author is. It hasn't been written down. So this is a retelling as it's been passed from parents to children and then from those children to their children. Once upon a mountaintop, three little trees stood and dreamed of what they wanted to be when they grew up. Do you ever think about what you want to be when you grow up? The first little tree looked up at the stars twinkling like diamonds above him. "I want to hold treasure," he said. "I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I will be the most beautiful treasure chest in the whole world." He's dreaming big, isn't he? The second little tree looked out at the small stream trickling by on its way to the ocean. "I want to be a strong sailing ship," he said. "I want to travel mighty waters and carry powerful kings. I will be the strongest ship in the world." The third little tree looked down into the valley below, where busy men and women worked in a busy town. "I don't want to leave the mountaintop at all," she said. "I want to grow so tall that when people stop to look up at me, they raise their eyes to heaven and they think of God. I will be the tallest tree in the world." They've got some big plans, don't they? Years passed. The rains came, the sun shone, and the little trees grew taller and taller and taller. One day, 3 woodcutters climbed the mountain. I wonder what they're going to do. I don't know what their plans are. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, "This tree is perfect. It's perfect for me." With a swoop of his shining axe, the first tree fell. "Now I shall be made into a beautiful chest," thought the first tree. "I shall hold wonderful treasure." The second woodcutter looked at the second tree and said, "This tree is strong. It's perfect for me." With a swoop of his axe, the second tree fell. "Now I shall sail mighty waters," thought the second tree. "I shall be a strong ship, fit for a king." The third tree felt her heart sink when the last woodcutter looked her way. She stood straight and tall and pointed bravely to heaven, but the woodcutter never even looked up. "Any kind of tree will do for me," he muttered, and with a swoop of his axe, the third tree fell. Oh my, I wonder what's going to happen to them. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter's shop, but the busy carpenter was not thinking about treasure chest. Instead, his work-worn hands fashioned the tree into a feed box for animals. The once beautiful tree was not covered with gold or filled with treasure. He was coated with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry farm animals. Wow, certainly not what he planned, was it? The second tree smiled when the woodcutter took him to a shipyard, but no mighty sailing ships were being made that day. Instead, the once strong tree was hammered and sawed into a simple fishing boat. Too small and too weak to sail an ocean or even a river, he was taken to a small lake. Every day he brought in loads of dead, smelly fish. Wasn't what he planned either, was it? The third tree was confused when the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and left her in the lumber yard. What happened, the once tall tree wondered. All I ever wanted to do was stay on the mountain and point to God. Wow, none of them got what they thought, did they? Many, many days and nights passed. The three trees almost forgot their dreams. But one night, golden starlight poured over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby in the feed box. I wish I could make a cradle for him, her husband whispered. The mother squeezed his hand and smiled as the starlight shone on the smooth and sturdy wood. The manger is beautiful, she said. And suddenly, the first tree knew he was holding the greatest treasure in the world. One evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into the old fishing boat. The traveler fell asleep as the second tree quietly sailed out into the lake. Soon a thundering and thrashing storm arose. The little tree shuddered. He knew he wasn't strong enough to carry so many passengers safely through the wind and rain. The tired man awakened. He stood up, stretched out his hand, and said, "Peace." And the storm stopped immediately. Suddenly, the second tree knew he was carrying the King of heaven and earth. One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the forgotten woodpile. She flinched as she was carried through an angry, jeering crowd. She shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt ugly and harsh and cruel. Boy. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. It made the first tree beautiful. It made the second tree strong. And every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. That was better than being the tallest tree in the world. Isn't it exciting how God took each of their dreams and through him they were able to become something mighty that he could use? I wonder what you'll be when you grow up.